If you're a producer that's been trying to sell beats, get placements, work with artists, but have been struggling to break through that barrier, then you've probably been feeling a little bit disheartened and trying to figure out what you can do to get that initial momentum that you need. Well, I've been making beats for a long time, and to be honest, it was only once I realized that there was this one must-have skill that you need in the modern era to try and get anywhere as a producer, and that is to be able to make your own samples. So today I'm going to show you how to make a sample from scratch, something that will hopefully help you get your first sales or placements, and make sure you stick around to the end of the video where I'm going to show you a few tips on what you can do with these samples once you've made them. Let's dive straight into it. So sometimes it can be quite daunting looking at an empty screen like this and trying to create something from scratch. What I like to do is usually start off with either a guitar or a piano to create the basic foundation of the idea. For this I like to just choose a scale that I'm comfortable with, mess about and find a basic chord progression. So that's as simple as you can get in terms of a progression. That's just an A minor chord and then a D minor. A 1-4 progression works really well for trap especially, so we'll just stick with that and maybe just play it in an inversion. A bit of fiddling and just adding some higher notes. This is what we've got. So you can see changing the loop length to half a bar just gives it a bit of movement, and that just makes it a little bit more interesting. We want to try to add in as much sort of interesting artifacts and weirdness as we can to make the sample more interesting. So now that we have the main progression, I just want to embellish that and add a bit of a melody to it. I like to use Analog Lab for this, and specifically for this I'm going to use this Book of Memories preset. So essentially we can play the exact same chords but just arpeggiate them. And like I said before, we want to make this really weird and add in a lot more texture and artifacts. A really easy way to do this is by throwing on Portal. This is a plugin which I'm sure you've seen so many producers use it. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but if you make it really subtle, just turn down the dry wet, you can get some really cool stuff going on. So you can hear instantly, it just makes it vibier. So if you're making a lot of samples in that style, I definitely recommend Portal. Now I'm going to sample these two layers together so that I have a separate audio file that I can process and add into the mix. Now it's good to have this as an option because you can just chop it up and do things that you would do with audio instead of MIDI. So as an example, I'm going to just chop this up and then reverse it. So now we can have a little bit of like a swell effect. And in fact, because this layer is quite subtle, we can be a bit more crazy with the effects. So kickstart. Half time as well. And then finally we'll throw on Spacer, which is a really good free multi-effects plugin I like to use. Now the plan is to make this sample like a good minute or so in length, so there has to be some different parts to the arrangement of it. So something you hear in a lot of samples these days is a respace, and this works really well for intros and breakdown sections. So you see I'm just following the progression, putting some walking notes in between, and because we've got a glide on the bass, it just sounds cool, just sort of riding the wave essentially. So now for me this is like the main meat of the sample. Everything we do now is like extra phrases, ear candy, accents and so on. So as an example, we've got this key sound here. So for a sound like this, which I'm going to use the higher notes for because we want to fill out that spectrum a bit, I like to drench it in like reverb or delay. Now we could just throw in like a quick accent or phrase. Now we'll do something similar with this analog lab sound. Now, as I mentioned before, I want to make this around a minute in length. So what I like to do is copy a few of these over and then just think about what we want to hear. So we'll move the bass over so it doesn't start immediately. And what I find works well in these samples is having some transitional sounds, whether it's a riser, maybe a small cymbal, something quite subtle, but something that just helps sort of differentiate each section. Now the final thing to do with the sample really is just throw on a bit more processing on the entire group. For this, RC20 is usually the perfect thing. You can see we can add just a bit of noise, and if we wanted to, we could also automate any of these parameters to make it even more interesting. Now when it comes to turning this into a full beat, just drag the sample in, and then you can see I've put the stems on individual layers in case I want to mess around with some of the arrangement, but we're just going to go straight into adding some trap drums to this. For the first hi-hat layer, I'm just using a hi-hat MIDI that's going to be in my Genesis kit. Then we just record in the snare. Then I'm just doing a super simple kick pattern for this because there's quite a bit of complexity within the melody. I like to keep the drums a bit more basic to make sure that it doesn't clash too much. And then just using a Spins 808, we can record in a basic 808 pattern that follows the two notes from that progression, which is the A and the D. The next thing you know, you've basically got an entire beat, and if you want, you can add a few more things that weren't in the original sample just to make it completely your own. So there you go, you can see most of the actual work is put into the sample itself. From there, it's quite formulaic to be able to add drums and 808 and then just flesh it out into an entire beat. So if you stuck around this far in the video, I appreciate it. So let me show you a few things that you can do with these samples that can hopefully lead to some more money in your pocket. So as I mentioned, you can use Discord to leverage your samples and try to get some placements as well as getting sales by working with other producers. So the best way to do this is on the Sonic's Hit Factory Discord, which is Covey's Discord. If you don't know Covey, check him out. Link to his channel will be in the description. And if you join his Discord, you can see there's a whole system set up where you can try to get placement opportunities. So you can see these are the types of artists that he's sending placement packs to. And if you want to get involved in that, basically in this Discord, he has a thing called the Bootcamp where you upload samples you've made or tracks you've made where you've added drums to samples, and you ask for drum god or loop god. If it's good, you can get the role. So you can see here on the right, loop god, and you'll see UndaSkore. I've got loop god because I've made some semi-decent samples. Once you've made some good samples, you are able to submit samples to his server, and then once you start submitting samples to his server, he will basically use them and they can be sent out for packs to really good artists, and you could hopefully get a placement that way. Another thing to do is always try to submit your samples on different Discord servers. BeatStars is one that I've used quite regularly and managed to get quite a few collab sales. You can see people post them in, say what their BeatStars account is and what the splits they want are, and you can see it's also just a good place in terms of promotion and networking to find like-minded producers in same genres and artists that want to work with you. So make sure you have Discord if you're a producer, and make sure you join things like Sonics. Any of your favorite producers usually have a Discord channel. So yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure you have a good one. Peace out.